Hi everyone, I just wanted to give you an update on my meeting this morning with Ofcom. So thank you to everyone that did email Ofcom about the mid-contract price rises. We're obviously pushing for a ban on those, and they reached out to me over the weekend, and we had a meeting this morning to discuss what we're looking for in a petition and the sort of changes that we're hoping to see. And obviously it gave them opportunity to talk to us. Now, before I get into what was said, their logic, the logic I proposed back, and our next steps and all of that, which I will give you, I just want to say, in the credit of Ofcom, I felt listened to. And I think that's an important thing. I remember explicitly my first meeting with Ofgem, which I was very nervous for, and I met a couple of their directors and assistant directors on a video call. And it was very much them trying to put me in my box. They invited me to their monthly meetings where things are discussed, but they didn't want to discuss our points. They didn't want to discuss headroom allowance and EBIT allowance and the fact that we wanted them changed, which was what my petition on energy was. They realised that there was a large audience following me and that it would be easier to put me in a monthly meeting with all the other consumer groups and charities. And at that point, there's an agenda for every meeting and we discuss what they want to discuss. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was being put in my box. And not listened to. Whereas this conversation with Ofcom, it was a one-on-one chat with, I won't say his name, but with a person that works there. And we had a conversation. And every time I raised a point, he addressed that point. And at the end of the conversation, he was thankful for my time and told me that to email him and the team at any point. We can have regular meetings as often as we want to discuss regulation in the industry and to help move it forwards. And I feel like there's a relationship he's trying to build there. And yeah, I just felt heard. And that says a lot. That's an important trait for a regulator. I quite liked that. They're not as structured, I'd say, as Ofgem. They don't have the monthly meetings where they get all of the views of all of the consumer groups and charities and people representing people. But that might be a good thing. If they're addressing consumer concerns in the same way as what they did with me, where they sit down, have a one-on-one chat, hear your points, discuss them, and you look for a way forward together, that may be more constructive than getting 50 people on a group call to discuss specifically what the regulator wants to discuss. It felt more productive. So yeah, there was just that acknowledgement to Ofcom that I am appreciative of their time and I did felt listened to, and I am aware that I can have an ongoing conversation with this guy, and I will be doing that. So in this meeting, we spoke about the ban on mid-contract price rises, which is what we're looking to implement. And obviously, his initial point is that they've just put in place this new rule, or they're in the process of putting in place the new rule, it doesn't actually get implemented till January, that providers have to give a pound and pence figure for your April increases. So right now, today, this year, your contract for mobile phone, broadband, TV packages, they all went up by inflation plus 3.9%. That 3.9% just being an industry standard figure in April. Next year, it won't be so confusing because it won't be inflation related. It's going to be a pound and pence figure. So anyone that signs a contract after January next year, their contract will state on April 1st, 2025, your bill will go up by X pound and Y pence. And then in April 2026, if it's a 2-year contract, it'll go up by A pounds and B pence. So it gives you more clarity over the longer term. My argument back to that was that that's not more clarity. That's kind of more confusing. At least we know how much our bills are going up. But now to compare prices, rather than it being an industry standard of everything going up by the same amount, I'm going to need to work out the entire cost of the contract, because 3 might give me a £30 contract with a £1.50 increase next year and a £2.50 increase the year after. But EE might offer me a £29 contract with a £3 increase next year and a £4 increase the year after. And now I don't know which contract is going to be cheaper over the term of the contract. And obviously, when you're doing that with your mobile phone handset, your mobile phone airtime, you've got your internet, you've got your TV packages, it becomes quite a lot of money. and you have to sit down and analyse every contract and then do the price comparisons to make sure you're getting a reasonable deal, which isn't fair. There are price comparison services that should do a lot of that legwork for you, but not everyone uses them. And it's not clear either. So we spoke about these points back and forth. Effectively, they are not going to do anything until they've had chance to analyse the impact of this current change. And that he didn't want to give a timeline, which is reasonable. He can't do that right now. That's not his job. But it's likely to be at least a year from when that change happens. We're not looking until 2026 before we can have a conversation about a mid-contract price rise ban. I did ask, and I think there might be some push on, like, there's some leeway for us to push for a different consultation where we force providers to provide a total value of contract. When I asked about that, he said that it was considered but ultimately rejected because they weren't sure on how it could be worded, because obviously some package contracts you might get a handset that gets paid off over 4 years, but a airtime contract that gets paid off over 2, and that might be part of the same contract. And then how do you differentiate the value of that contract compared to one where you're paying off handset and airtime over 3 years each together in one contract? And how does that, really provide clarity for a consumer as to which is the better contract to go with? Because then they'd need to get airtime for the final 2 years on that first contract, and it becomes quite confusing. Which I understand what he's saying there. There is a lot of confusion because of the varying products available in the telecoms industry. But I think with the right wording and the right push from us, we could probably convince them to do a consultation on getting a total value added to each contract we sign so that you can do a like-for-like comparison. And in my mindset, if you're going for a SIM-only contract, which is fairly popular, it would be nice to know whether that contract's going to cost you £200 over the term or £600 over the term. And once you know the overall price, then you can start comparing things like how many gigabytes of data you're getting per month and things like that, which are generally standardized nowadays to allow everyone to have everything. There's very few contracts that you will run out of minutes or texts or data by the end of the month. Most of them are sort of, are you a high user or a very high user sort of thing. But I think that's probably going to be our next push. There was a lot discussed in this 40 minutes with, I think it's 45 we ended up on. It was meant to be a half-hour meeting, and he gave me the extra time to discuss our points. But effectively, there will be no changes on the mid-contract price rises. They will not ban them for the foreseeable future, for the next year and a half at least. And that's something we have to lump. He did, however, inform me that there's a CMA consultation that's going on that's looking into pricing structures. So obviously I'm not aware of this at the moment. I will be looking into it and giving you guys updates on that. That may be an alternative route for us to go down to see if we can get a ban on mid-contract price rises. But right now I can't tell you that one way or another. Another thing I asked him that we discussed, which I find very interesting, and I think you guys will find this interesting. It was actually I was a little bit annoyed by this one. This was one of the points that outraged me a little bit, is that they're not looking to help with the cost of contracts. They're looking at clarity of contracts. Now, my first point on that is that the clarity around pricing is not improved with this new, let's be perfectly fair, is only minutely improved with this new rule. Okay, so they've taken away the guessing of inflation from our mid-contract price rises, but we still don't really understand how much the contract is going to cost us without sitting down and working it out, and we still can't compare without looking at dozens of different contracts, sitting down and working out the total cost of each one, and then comparing them to see if it's what we want. There's a slight increase in clarity. It's not much. But what I found really interesting is that they're not going to judge the success of this new rule on whether or not consumers are ultimately paying more for their contract under this new rule. So just because a provider has to give pound and pence figure, it doesn't mean that pound and pence figure is going to be smaller than it would be under inflation. So I asked them if they were going to compare that metric. Are you going to, after a year, go, well, if prices had increased by inflation at the midterm increase, they would have gone up by this much. But instead, suppliers are on average increasing it by this much. Therefore, consumers are paying more or less than what they would have done under the old rule. And effectively, his answer was no, they're not looking at that metric because they are not looking to try and bring down the prices of our contracts. That's not something they're measuring with this rule change. And I found that really interesting. He was very adamant that whilst they do have powers to regulate prices, they don't unless there's extremely unfair competition in the market. And there's not low competition in these markets. There are hundreds of contracts and deals and special offers on all the time for all of these products, mobile phones, airtime, TV packages, broadband, all of these things they're very competitive markets. And so Ofcom are effectively not looking to regulate prices. They are leaving it up to the providers and the free market effect, effectively, to manage pricing in the industry. I find that interesting, that that's not something they're regulating. And if I'm being honest, I do think the free market effect works in this industry. The only place it doesn't work, and I probably am going to start another petition on this, is end of contract rollover contracts. So more often than not, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this, if you come to the end of the term of your broadband contract, for example, they will roll you onto a new broadband contract unless you explicitly tell them not to. And that new contract will be twice as expensive as your old one. And then you have to call them and you have to fight and you have to be on the phone for 2 hours being like, no, I'll just go somewhere else. You're way too expensive. Why are you doing that? And eventually you'll end up on the phone with someone in the cancellation team who'll go, oh, I don't know why this wasn't offered to you before. Here, you can have the same contract you were on before at £1 a month more. And you just go, yeah, all right, it's not worth the effort to switch for saving £1 a month. Thanks, I'll take it. That's dodgy, in my opinion. That's corrupt, and they shouldn't be forcing people onto contracts that are twice as expensive as what someone else is paying for the same product. It should be a tariff. You sell one product at one price and everyone pays that price. So I might start a new petition on that. But outside of that, there's clear evidence that mobile phone prices and contracts are not mobile phones, sorry, airtime contracts are coming down in prices year on year because of the effect of the free market. And so I do think it works, but again, it's something I'll have to analyze a bit further. So the overall thing from this is that I'm coming away from the meeting disappointed. We're not getting the mid-contract price rises in the midterm. We might have to look at that in 2026, and I'll still be doing the regulator guy stuff by then. So don't worry, I will look at it then. So in terms of next steps, I think there are 3 paths that I'll go down simultaneously. Let's call it 4 paths I'm going to go down simultaneously that I'd like to get everyone involved with, please. The first one is going to be asking Ofcom to do a consultation on getting the total value of a contract added to the contract so we can do a like-for-like price comparison on what we're getting. I think that'll give us far more clarity and be able to compare easier to make sure we're getting good deals. I think I will engage Ofcom in conversations about the metrics they use in their ex-post analysis of the decoupling of mid-contract price rises from inflation. I think that's really important that they do look at the right things. And I think there should be an analysis on whether or not we have been negatively impacted financially by excessive increases above inflation from this new policy. I think that needs to be analysed and reviewed and actually noted. So I will work with them on that. I will be engaging with CMA on whatever their consultation is. So I'm going to look into that for all of us. I'll do video updates and blog updates on that to see what we can do there to try and sort of get mid-contract price rises banned via an alternative route. See what can be done on that. And then the fourth thing I'll do is I think in the next week, probably in the next month or two, I'll look at creating a petition to effectively put a price cap on telecoms contracts. And so I'm sure most of you know about the price cap in the energy industry. The purpose of the price cap is to support people that are disengaged with the market to make sure they're not being unfairly charged. So this was at a time where half the market were on fixed rate contracts and the other half were on variable. And the variable tariffs had no cap. They could just be whatever the supplier wanted. So the cap was to be put in place to ensure those customers had some form of protection. And I think that needs to be done in the telecoms industries. So broadband, TV packages, mobile phones, airtime, all of those industries need to have a price cap that stops suppliers from doubling or tripling the cost of a person's monthly bill if they fall away from a fixed rate tariff and for some reason have been unable to get another contract in place in time. Whether that's they're just disengaged in the market and aren't paying attention to their bills, whether they've got family emergencies or their own holiday or something happened in their life that stops them from being able to go online and fix a contract, whether they just forget. They shouldn't be penalized for that. They shouldn't have a loyalty tax for sitting with a provider that they've been with for a few years. Their prices shouldn't double. So I'm going to start a petition on that. Fair warning to Ofcom, I will email this video to them as well so they can see the summary I've given. I think that's reasonable. But yeah, I think that's the work we'll be doing over the next few months. I will be taking some time to consider our next steps. So there's going to be a couple of weeks while I work on Ofgem work and I lay out a structure in my mind that I can present to you on how we move forward with those 4 paths. But there will be a lot of work coming, so please do get involved. One thing I want to say is that it's disappointing we didn't get what we wanted from this meeting, but it's not surprising. And we all need to acknowledge that regulators are there to help consumers, and consumers need to tell regulators what we want. Now, I really, really believe in the work that I'm doing as a regulator guy. I love this work. It's not profitable at the moment at all. There's no money in it, but it's important because the regulators are spoken to by businesses all the time. They're actively engaged with the regulators to try and change the rules in favor of themselves. But the regulators will listen to us if we tell them what we want. And my whole purpose is to do the legwork, to read the 200-page documents they produce filled with jargon, answer all of their complex questions, and then provide that to you in a way that you can then provide a reasonable response to these consultations and tell the regulator what we want. That's the whole purpose of the regulator guy. I want to get as many people in the country as possible engaged with regulators so that we can take power back. Because at the moment, they're just being run by the providers and the suppliers of the industries who are doing everything for profit. We're being taken for a ride because we're disengaged. And that's our problem. We can fix that by getting involved. So I just want to take the time to thank everyone that is involved, all of the hundreds, thousands of people that have emailed Ofgem and Ofcom over the last 3 years and that are following my work, but to also ask you to spread the word on this work. The regulators will listen to us. The more of us that get involved, the more they're going to listen. And I will continue to do the legwork. You just have to follow my blog, effectively subscribe, and I'll tell you when a consultation has been posted, what my response is, and how you can get involved. And each consultation should only take you 2 minutes to get involved. Copy and paste, send. It should be that simple. Now, I'm not saying that's all you have to do. I'd like it even more if everyone read the responses that I'm sending and make sure you actually agree with them, because sometimes I might say something you don't agree with. But at the very least, my responses will be in plain English that everyone can understand. You don't have to be an expert in the industries to take in the information. That's the work I'm doing. That's how I'm here to help. And we can all help each other by spreading the word and getting involved as much as possible. That's my little speech. Sorry, that's everything for today. I understand this has been a long video. Thank you if you've gotten to this point. Thank you for watching. Please do spread the word about the regulator guy work. We can all get involved and shape our regulators the way we want them, shape our regulated industries to be what we want them to be. Thank you, everyone. I'll be back in a few days, probably with some Ofgem updates. Cheers.